The Memphis sun beat down hot and heavy even in the late afternoon. Elsie Mae tugged at the collar of her worn uniform, feeling the sticky fabric cling to her skin. Another day at the diner, serving up lukewarm coffee and stale jokes, was drawing to a close. She wiped down the counter, her mind miles away from the clatter of plates and the smell of grease. She dreamt of colors of vibrant hues, splashed across a canvas of the quiet focus that came with a brush in her hand. But dreams, she knew, didn't pay the bills. Her little apartment above the dry cleaner was cramped and smelled faintly of chemicals, but it had one small window that looked out onto the bustling street. Sometimes after her shift, she'd sit by it, a worn sketchbook open on her lap, letting her pencil dance across the page. She drew everything: the peeling paint of the barber shop across the street, the crooked smile of old Mr. Henderson who ran the hardware store, the way the light caught the dust motes in the diner's front window. Her art wasn't grand, just small observations, little bits of beauty she found in her ordinary world. But it was her world, and she sometimes wondered if it was all she'd ever know. Today, though, as she stepped out of the diner and into the glaring sunlight, something different shimmered on the street. It wasn't a mirage from the heat, but a real solid object, gleaming like a jewel. A Cadillac, not just any Cadillac, but a Cadillac that seemed to hum with its own special magic. It was long and sleek, a deep glossy pink that shimmered almost purple in the sunlight with chrome trim that sparkled like diamonds. It looked like it had rolled right out of a movie screen, too perfect, too flamboyant for this everyday street. Elsie Mae stopped dead in her tracks, her cheap canvas bag slipping from her shoulder, her breath hitched. She'd never seen anything like it up close. Cars like this belonged to movie stars, to millionaires, to people whose lives were as bright and polished as this automobile. She took a step closer, drawn in by its impossible beauty. The fins at the back rose elegantly, like wings about to take flight. The white wall tires looked pristine, as if they'd never touched dirt. She reached out a hesitant hand, then pulled it back, afraid to mar its perfect surface. It felt like something fragile, something that might shatter if touched by a clumsy hand. Her eyes traced the curves, the lines, the way the sunlight danced off the chrome. She imagined sketching it, trying to capture that vibrant pink, that impossible shine. For a moment she forgot the sweat on her brow, the ache in her feet, the endless loop of her days. She was lost in pure, unadulterated admiration, a silent, reverent awe for something so utterly magnificent. Then a flicker of movement caught her eye. The driver's side door, which had been slightly ajar, swung open wider. A leg emerged, clad in tailored dark trousers, followed by a polished black shoe. Elsie Mae's gaze traveled upward, past a slim waist, a broad chest, to a face that was instantly, shockingly familiar. It was him. Elvis Presley. He stood there, framed by the impossible pink Cadillac, looking even more vibrant and larger than life than he did on the movie posters or album covers. His hair, dark and perfectly coiffed, shone in the sun. He wore a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled up just enough to show strong forearms. He wasn't just handsome, he radiated an energy that seemed to light up the whole street. People usually mobbed him, Elsie Mae knew. But here, on this quiet side street, there was no crowd, just the two of them, the magnificent car shimmering between them. He leaned against the car, a casual, easy posture, as if owning a pink Cadillac and being the biggest star in the world was just another Tuesday. He looked towards her, and for a terrifying, heart-stopping moment, their eyes met. Elsie Mae felt her cheeks flush fiery red. She'd been caught staring like a simpleton. She should look away, apologize, disappear into the anonymity of the busy street. But she couldn't. His eyes were a startling blue, direct and kind. There was no judgment there, no impatience, just a quiet, curious look. A small, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips. He wasn't bothered by her staring. In fact, he seemed almost amused. "She's a looker, ain't she?" he said, his voice a low rumble that was even richer and deeper than on his records. It wrapped around her warm and inviting. Elsie Mae's heart pounded like a drum against her ribs. She swallowed hard, trying to find her voice. but her throat felt dry. All she could manage was a small, breathless nod. She felt like a deer caught in headlights, captivated and utterly speechless, standing there in her faded diner uniform, dreaming of colors, while a legend stood before her, next to a car that belonged in a fantasy. The ordinary street had just become the most extraordinary place in the world, and she had no idea what to do next. Elsie Mae just stood there, rooted to the spot, her mouth slightly agape. The question, so simple and direct, hung in the warm air. "She's a looker, ain't she?" He wasn't talking about her. Of course, he meant the Cadillac. But the way he said it, with that slow, easy smile, made her feel seen, not just as a random girl on the street, but as someone who appreciated the beauty before them. Yes, sir," she finally managed, her voice barely a whisper. She felt like a child caught with her hand in the cookie jar. Even though she'd done nothing wrong but admire a car, She's beautiful." Elvis chuckled, a soft, pleasant sound that made her stomach do a little flip. He straightened up from leaning against the car, and for a second she felt a wave of shyness, so strong she almost turned and ran. But then he took a step closer, and his eyes, those incredible blue eyes, held hers. They were genuinely friendly, not demanding or judging. "Never seen one quite like her before, have you?" he asked, a hint of amusement in his tone. He wasn't mocking her, just observing. Elsie Mae shook her head, finding a tiny bit more courage. "No, sir. Not up close, anyway. I've seen pictures, of course, but she's different in person," she almost added, "like you," but caught herself. He nodded slowly, as if genuinely considering her words. "She's got her custom painted. My mama loved pink. Thought it'd be a nice touch, a little something extra." His voice was laced with affection when he spoke of his mother, a warmth that was unexpected from the king of rock and roll. It made him seem more human, less like the distant idol on her radio. He walked around to the front of the car, running a hand lightly over the hood. Elsie Mae's eyes followed his movements. She noticed the way his shirt pulled a little across his shoulders, the easy grace in his steps. He wasn't showing off. He was simply being himself. "So, what's your name, darling?" he asked, turning back to face her. The directness of the question, the casual endearment, made her blush again. "Elsie Mae," she replied, her voice a little stronger now. "Elsie Mae Harper." "Pleased to meet you, Elsie Mae," he said, extending a hand. It was a large hand, strong but gentle as it clasped hers. His grip was firm, warm. It was a proper handshake, not a dismissive flick. "I'm Elvis." "I know," she blurted out, then immediately wanted to kick herself. Of course she knew. Everyone knew. He grinned, a flash of white teeth. "Guess that's a pretty safe bet these days," he admitted. "So, Elsie Mae, you seem to have a real appreciation for fine machinery, or just fine colors." He gestured to the pink car. She smiled shyly. "Both, I suppose." I like to draw, and that color, it's just something else." "You draw? That's mighty interesting. What do you draw?" "Oh, just things. Whatever I see. Buildings, people. Sometimes I try to catch the light." She felt suddenly self-conscious, her small hobby seeming insignificant next to his dazzling world. He listened intently, not interrupting his gaze, steady and thoughtful. "Sounds like a good way to see the world, Elsie Mae. Most folks just rush on by, don't take the time to really look." He paused. Then his gaze drifted back to the Cadillac. "You know this old girl? She rides as smooth as she looks. Ever been in a Cadillac?" She shook her head. "Never. Not even close." He leaned against the driver's door, his eyes sparkling with an idea. In Elvis Presley's pink Cadillac, it was an absurd. What would people say? What if she got mobbed with him? What if it was a trick? Her practical side screamed caution. She had a shift tomorrow. She had laundry to do. Then another voice, a smaller, quieter one, whispered in her ear, "When would you ever get a chance like this again?" This wasn't just a ride. It was an invitation into a world she'd only ever glimpsed from afar. It was a chance to step outside the small, predictable circle of her days. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated fantasy made real. She looked at him, really looked. He didn't seem like a dangerous man or a boastful one. He just looked like a man offering a simple, friendly gesture. His eyes were patient, waiting for her answer. I don't know. She stammered the words, catching in her throat. He gave her a gentle, reassuring smile. No pressure, Elsie Mae. Just thought you might enjoy it. There ain't many folks who get to ride in a car like this, especially not on a quiet afternoon. The view, not just from the car window, but the view of a life she couldn't imagine. The sheer, exhilarating audacity of it. Her practical worries began to shrink, overshadowed by the thrilling possibility. This wasn't about him being Elvis, not entirely. It was about an adventure, a break from the ordinary, a moment to truly feel alive. She took a deep breath, the warm Memphis air filling her lungs. Her decision was sudden, impulsive, and utterly unlike her. Okay, she said, her voice stronger than before, laced with a tremor of excitement. Okay, Mr. Presley, I'd love to. Elvis's smile widened, genuine and bright. He gestured to the passenger door, which he'd already opened for her. Then, step right in, Elsie Mae, and please call me Elvis. Elsie Mae hesitated for a split second, then took a tentative step towards the open door of the Cadillac. The leather interior gleamed, pristine and inviting. She slid onto the seat, sinking into its plush softness. The air inside smelled faintly of new car and something distinctly masculine, a hint of cologne. It was cool, thanks to the air conditioning, a luxury she rarely encountered. She pulled the door shut, and the world outside, with its dusty streets and hurried pedestrians, seemed to muffle, fading into a distant hum. Elvis slipped behind the wheel, settling in with a comfortable ease that spoke of countless hours spent in similar vehicles. He turned the key, and the powerful engine rumbled to life, a low, smooth growl that vibrated through the floorboards. It wasn't a loud, aggressive roar, but a confident purr, promising power. "Comfortable back there?" he asked, glancing at her in the rearview mirror, his eyes prinkling at the corners. "Oh yes, very," Elsie Mae replied, feeling a giggle bubbling up inside her. It was so real, so utterly beyond anything she could have imagined. She looked around the spacious interior, running a hand over the smooth dashboard. Every detail was perfect, from the polished chrome accents to the soft fabric of the headliner. "Good," he said. And with a gentle press of the accelerator, the Cadillac glided forward. They moved silently, almost majestically, along the street. The world outside seemed to slow down, blurring into streaks of color as they passed. Elsie Mae felt like she was floating detached from her ordinary life, suspended in this bubble of luxury and improbable connection for a few minutes. They drove in comfortable silence. Elvis navigated the streets with practiced ease, his hands light on the wheel. Elsie Mae watched him, fascinated by his profile, the way the light caught his eyelashes, the slight frown of concentration between his brows. As he took a turn, he wasn't performing, he was just driving, and that made him seem even more real. "So, Elsie Mae," he said, breaking the quiet, "you said you draw. Do you do it much like for a living?" She shook her head. "Oh no, sir, just a hobby. I work at the diner down the street." She gestured vaguely behind them. "The one you just passed." He nodded. "Yeah, I saw it. So what's it like? Working in a diner?" "It's work, busy, lots of cleaning, people come and go. It's all right, pays the rent." She tried to sound nonchalant, but the truth was, it was exhausting and uninspiring. "And the drawing? What's that like?" His voice was genuinely curious, as if her small hobby held as much interest for him as a sold-out concert. "That's different," she said, choosing her words carefully. "That's where I feel free, I guess. Like I can really see things. It's quiet, mostly. Just me and the paper. And it feels like I'm making something, even if it's just a little sketch." She suddenly felt a blush creep up her neck. She was talking about her deepest passion to Elvis Presley, the man who created music that moved millions. It seemed so trivial in comparison, but he didn't laugh or dismiss her. He listened, his gaze fixed on the road, but his attention clearly on her words. "I know what you mean," he said, his voice soft. "Music's like that for me. Something that wasn't there before. Then boom, it's in the air, and it touches people. It's a good feeling making something from nothing." He understood. The world saw him as a superstar, a voice, a performer, but he was also a creator, just like her, albeit on a vastly different scale. "Do you ever miss just being able to draw or sing without everyone watching?" she asked impulsively, surprised by her own boldness. He sighed, a low, weary sound, sometimes more than sometimes. "Actually, there's that's a luxury. You, on the other hand, you can just sit down anywhere with your sketchbook and nobody bothers you, right?" Elsie Mae laughed, a genuine light sound. "That's true. Nobody's asking for my autograph. That's for sure. See, there's good and bad in everything, Elsie Mae. But the good, the real good, is making something you love. That's what matters." They talked on, easily, naturally. He asked about Memphis, about her family. She asked about his travels, about what it was like to be constantly recognized. He spoke of the loneliness of fame, the pressure to always be on, the joy of creating music, and the quiet comfort of his family and close friends. Elsie Mae found herself talking about her quiet life, her dreams of seeing more of the world and her longing to do something that truly mattered. She mentioned, almost as an afterthought, a local art class she'd always wanted to take, but never had the time or money for. The ride wasn't just a physical journey. It was a journey into a surprisingly personal conversation. In the pink Cadillac, surrounded by luxury, Elsie Mae felt more at ease, more truly herself than she had in years. She wasn't a waitress, and he wasn't a distant celebrity. They were just two people, sharing a moment, finding common ground in the universal human need to create, to connect, and to find meaning in a world that often felt too big and too demanding. She realized with a surprising clarity that for all his fame, Elvis Presley was just a man with a big heart and a lot of quiet wisdom, and he was really, truly listening, instead of just circling the block. Elvis took a turn onto a road Elsie Mae didn't recognize, a winding path that led away from the main streets. The hum of the city faded, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the distant chirping of cicadas. They passed through a quieter neighborhood, then the houses thinned out, giving way to stretches of green. "Where are we going?" Elsie Mae asked, a mix of curiosity and a tiny spark of apprehension. Elvis glanced at her, his smile reassuring. "Just a little spot, I know. Good place to clear your head. Nobody ever bothers me there." Soon the Cadillac pulled off the road onto a small, unmarked dirt track. Trees lined both sides, their branches forming a leafy tunnel. Elsie Mae held her breath as they bumped along the powerful car, barely registering the uneven ground. After a few minutes, the track opened up into a clearing. Atop a small hill, below them, spread out like a tapestry, was the entire city of Memphis. The Mississippi River snaked through it, glinting silver in the late afternoon sun. Distant buildings shimmered, and the sounds of traffic were a muted murmur. It was a breathtaking view, one Elsie Mae had never known existed. Elvis cut the engine, and the sudden silence was profound, broken only by the gentle breeze and the rustling leaves. He got out of the car, and Elsie Mae followed, stepping onto the soft earth. The air up here was cooler, cleaner, carrying the scent of pine and damp soil. "Isn't it something?" he said, walking to the edge of the clearing and looking out over the panorama. His voice was hushed, almost reverent. "It's incredible," Elsie Mae whispered, truly awestruck. She felt a lump form in her throat. She, Elsie Mae Harper from the diner, was standing on a secret hilltop, with Elvis Presley, looking at her city from a perspective she'd never dreamed of. They stood there for a few moments, just absorbing the view, the quiet. It was a world away from the dazzling lights and screaming crowds. It was a place of peace, and it was clear why he cherished it. "You know, Elsie Mae," he began, turning slightly to face her. "When I first started out, I used to come up to places like this, look out over the city and just dream of making enough money to buy my mama a house, dream of singing my songs for folks who wanted to hear 'em." He paused, a faraway look in his eyes. "Never in a million years did I imagine it would become all this." He gestured vaguely at the world beyond their hill. "It must be overwhelming," she said, understanding. "It is," he admitted. "But it's a blessing, too. I never forget that. Never. Which is why, well, that's why I try to remember where I came from, and to remember that everyone has a dream, no matter how big or small." "You said you like to draw. Do you have a sketchbook with you?" Elsie Mae felt a jolt. She always carried it. A small, tattered brown book she tucked into her bag. It was her secret comfort. "Yes," she said. She pulled it from her canvas bag, her hands trembling slightly. "Mind if I see it?" he asked gently. Her heart pounded. No one had ever asked to see her drawings. Not really. They were private. Intimate glimpses. Into her door, to fro. He took it carefully, as if it were a precious bacon, and began to flip through the pages. She watched his face, anxious for his reaction. He paused at a sketch of a wilting rose she'd found on the street, then at a quick study of an old man's weathered face. He lingered on a charcoal drawing of the diner's reflection in a puddle, capturing the grimy beauty of it. "Elsie Mae," he said softly, looking up from the book, his expression serious. These are really something. You've got a real eye, a way of seeing things other folks miss." He pointed to a drawing of a cluttered bookshelf. "Look at that, the shadows, the way the light falls on the spines of the books. You made this bookshelf come alive." Elsie Mae felt a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just a polite compliment. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes stinging a little. His words were a balm to a part of her she hadn't even realized was hurting, the part that doubted her own talent, that believed her dreams were too small, too impractical. "So why aren't you doing more of this?" he asked, closing the sketchbook gently and handing it back to her. "Why are you working in a diner when you can create beauty like this?" She shrugged, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the fading light. "It's not so simple. Elvis art doesn't pay the bills, and I don't know anyone. I don't know how to even begin. There's that art class, like I mentioned, but it cost money, and it's a long way from my place, and with my shifts." Her voice trailed off the familiar excuses, sounding hollow even to her own ears, now that they were out loud. He listened, his expression thoughtful. "Yeah, I get it. It's hard, believe me. I know a thing or two about doors being closed in your face, but sometimes, Elsie Mae, you gotta find a way to kick 'em open. Or sometimes you just need a little help getting your foot in." Turned back to the view of the city, and for a moment Elsie Mae thought he was done, that the topic was closed. But then he spoke again, his voice firm, resolute. "There's a fellow I know, name's Mr. Davies. He runs a small art gallery not too far from here. He's a good man, got an eye for talent, and he's always looking for new artist folks who see the world in a fresh way." Elsie Mae's heart started to pound again, not with nervousness, but with a sudden, overwhelming hope. "He's a friend of a friend," Elvis continued, turning to her, his gaze unwavering. "I could put in a good word for you, just for him to take a look at your work. No promises, mind you, but it'd be a start. You could show him your sketchbook, tell him what you told me, about how it feels when you draw." Elsie Mae stared at him, speechless. This was an open door, an actual, tangible path. Her dream, which had felt so flimsy and distant, suddenly seemed within reach, illuminated by the Memphis sunset and a kind man's unexpected generosity. This was a chance to change her entire life. Elsie Mae could only stare at Elvis, her mind reeling. Quiet of the hilltop, the beauty of the fading light over Memphis, the incredible weight of his words, it all coalesced into a moment that felt both impossibly grand and intimately personal. A gallery owner, a connection, a chance. "Mr. Davies," she finally managed, her voice barely a whisper, You do that for me." Elvis nodded, his expression earnest. "Why wouldn't I? Elsie Mae, you got talent. I saw it. And I believe in folks getting a fair shake. Lord knows, I wouldn't be where I am if somebody hadn't believed in me back when I was just a kid with a guitar and a prayer." He paused, looking out at the city. "Besides, it's not for me. It's for your art. And for you. You deserve a chance to see what you can do with it." He reached into the pocket of his trousers and pulled out a small folded piece of paper and a pen. He scribbled something quickly, then handed it to her. "Here's his number and address, and just tell him Elvis sent you. Tell him you're the artist I told him about. He'll know." Elsie Mae took the paper, her fingers trembling as they brushed his. It felt like holding a lottery ticket, a key to a world she'd only ever dreamed of. I don't know what to say, Elvis. Thank you, it's too much." He smiled a gentle, understanding smile. "But if I can help you get your foot in the door, then it's my pleasure." He looked at her, his gaze steady and encouraging. "You got a gift, Elsie Mae. Don't let it just sit in a sketchbook. The world needs beauty, and you can make it." His words, simple and profound, resonated deep within her. She had always dismissed her art as a small, private thing, something that didn't matter much in the grand scheme of things. But he saw it differently. He saw it as a gift, something the world needed. They stayed on the hilltop for a little while longer, the conversation turning lighter. He told her a funny story about a fan encounter, and she recounted a particularly disastrous moment at the diner involving a spilled milkshake. But beneath the light-hearted chatter, Elsie Mae felt a new current flowing through her. A sense of purpose, a quiet determination. Finally, as the last streaks of orange and purple faded from the sky, Elvis suggested they head back. The ride down the hill and back into the city felt different this time. The Cadillac still felt like a dream, but now it was a dream infused with possibility. The city lights, once just a distant glimmer, now seemed to beckon, full of hidden opportunities. When they pulled up outside the diner again, the street looked the same, but Elsie Mae felt utterly transformed. The air was cooler now, the bustling sounds of the evening more pronounced. It was a stark contrast to the quiet hilltop and the luxurious bubble of the Cadillac. Elvis turned off the engine. "Well, Elsie Mae," he said, his voice softer now. "This is where we part ways. Thank you, Elvis, for everything, for the ride, for showing me the view, and especially for this." She clutched the folded paper in her hand. He reached over and patted her hand gently. "You go on now, Elsie Mae, and you promise me you'll call Mr. Davies. Don't let this opportunity slip by." "I promise," she said, her voice firm. She knew deep down that she couldn't let him down, or herself. She opened the car door and stepped out, back onto the familiar pavement. Pink Cadillac, so grand and vibrant, seemed to glow in the dimming light. She stood there watching as Elvis nodded, gave her one last kind smile, and then pulled away from the curb. The powerful car glided down the street, its taillights glowing like ruby eyes, then turned a corner and disappeared from view. And just like that, he was gone. King of rock and roll, the pink Cadillac, the improbable conversation. It was all a memory, vivid and almost unbelievable. But Elsie Mae still held the small piece of paper in her hand. It felt solid, real, a tangible link to a chance encounter that had just planted the seed of something truly life-altering. She walked towards her apartment building, the familiar smells of the dry cleaner filling the air. But tonight, they seemed different. They weren't stifling. They were just part of the backdrop to a new beginning. She clutched the paper tighter, her mind already racing with plans. This wasn't just a dream anymore. Thanks to a simple act of kindness from an unexpected stranger, it felt like it could finally become her reality. A folded piece of paper lay on Elsie Mae's small chipped kitchen table, a beacon in her dim apartment. It had been there for 2 days, a constant silent reminder of the impossible afternoon. Every time she looked at it, her heart did a little flutter kick of excitement, followed by a cold plunge of fear. "Mr. Davies' Gallery," she read aloud, tracing the elegant script with her finger. And below it a phone number. The offer weighed on her. It was a golden ticket, a lifeline, but it also felt like an immense burden. What if she called and Mr. Davies laughed at her? What if her art wasn't good enough? What if she failed? The comfort of the familiar, even if it was dull, was a strong pull. The diner was safe, predictable. This was uncharted territory, terrifyingly beautiful. Her roommate Betty, a pragmatic woman who worked at the textile mill, had been skeptical. "Elvis Presley, you say? Offering to get your drawings in a gallery. Elsie Mae, are you sure you weren't just dreaming? Men like that don't just go around helping little diner waitresses." Elsie Mae had tried to explain, to convey the genuine warmth in Elvis's eyes, the sincere way he'd spoken. But Betty just shook her head, dismissing it as a flight of fancy. "Sounds like he was just being nice, dear. Don't get your hopes up." Her Aunt Mildred, though, had been surprisingly encouraging. "Well, if Elvis Presley himself saw something in your drawings, and maybe there's really something there, what do you have to lose by calling? Just your time." That last thought echoed in Elsie Mae's mind. What did she have to lose? A few minutes on the phone, and what did she have to gain? She spent the first day after the meeting oscillating between bursts of excited planning and crippling self-doubt. She cleaned her apartment twice, alphabetized her small collection of records, and even polished her old worn shoes, anything to avoid picking up the phone. On the second day, she brought out her sketchbook, flipping through the pages, trying to see them through Elvis's eyes. Were they truly good? Or was he just being kind? She picked up her pencil, but her hand trembled too much to draw. That evening, after another long shift at the diner, she walked home, the city lights seeming to mock her indecision. She thought of Elvis's words. "You gotta be the one to pick up the phone. You gotta be the one to walk through that door." He had given her the chance. Now it was up to her. She reached her apartment, pulled out the crumpled piece of paper and held it in her hand. Her heart hammered. She could feel the faint imprint of his handwriting, a tangible connection to that moment. If she didn't try, she would forever regret it. She would always wonder. And that thought, the thought of living with a lifelong regret, was scarier than any potential failure. Taking a deep, shaky breath, Elsie Mae walked over to the rotary phone on the shared hallway table. Her fingers hovered over the dial. This was it. She dialed the number, each rotation of the dial feeling like a monumental effort. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Elsie Mae's stomach clenched. Just as she was about to hang up, thinking it was a sign, a deep, cultured voice answered. "Davies' Gallery, Mr. Davies speaking." Elsie Mae swallowed. Hello, Mr. Davies. My name is Elsie Mae Harper. I'm calling because Elvis Presley suggested I get in touch with you." There was a moment of silence on the other end, a pause that felt like an eternity. Elsie Mae's heart sank. He probably thought she was crazy. Then Mr. Davies's voice, a little less formal now, full of mild curiosity. "Elvis, you say? Well, now that's an interesting reference. What can I do for you?" "M.S. Harper." Elsie Mae gathered her courage, her voice still trembling slightly, but growing steadier with each word. She told him about her drawing, about her sketchbook, about how Elvis had seen her work and believed she had talent. She didn't go into too much detail about the Cadillac ride or the hilltop, keeping it professional. Mr. Davies listened patiently. "Well, Elvis is a man of many talents, but I didn't know he was also an art critic. He certainly never mentioned any artists to me before. This piques my interest. M.S. Harper, Can you bring your sketchbook by the gallery tomorrow morning? Say 10 o'clock? Elsie Mae's breath hitched. Yes, Mr. Davies, I can thank you so much. Don't thank me yet. MS Harper, we'll see what you got. 10 o'clock sharp. He hung up. Elsie Mae stood there, phone still in hand, a wide, triumphant grin spreading across her face. She had done it. She had taken the first step. The next morning, dressed in her best and only good dress, her worn sketchbook clutched tight in her hands, Elsie Mae took the long bus ride across town to the address Elvis had given her. The Davies Gallery was on a quiet, tree-lined street, a small, elegant building with a discreet sign. It looked nothing like the diner. She pushed open the heavy oak door and stepped inside. The air was cool and quiet, filled with the scent of aged paper and canvas. Sunlight streamed in from a skylight, illuminating a few striking paintings on the walls. A man with kind eyes and neatly combed gray hair emerged from a back room. Ms. Harper, I'm Arthur Davies. Elsie Mae introduced herself, her voice a little shaky again, and handed him her sketchbook. Mr. Davies took it much as Elvis had, with a respectful gravity. He sat down at a small table, inviting her to do the same, and began to flip through the pages. Elsie Mae watched his face, biting her lip. He was meticulous, taking his time, really looking at each drawing. His expression remained neutral, making it impossible to guess what he was thinking. Finally, he closed the book. He looked at her, and his eyes, though kind, were shrewd. Ms. Harper, he said slowly, Elvis Presley was right. You do have talent. Raw, untamed, but certainly there. Your eye for detail, your understanding of light and shadow, it's quite remarkable for someone untrained. Elsie Mae felt a surge of hope, so strong it almost brought tears to her eyes. Elsie Mae's heart soared. It was real, a group exhibition, guidance. This was more than she could have ever asked for. Yes, Mr. Davies, she said, her voice clear and strong. Yes, please, I'd love to. The first step was taken, and it felt like walking on air. The first few weeks were a dizzying whirlwind for Elsie Mae. Mr. Davies, true to his word, had given her 3 slots in the gallery's upcoming group exhibition. He also sat down with her for hours, carefully critiquing her existing work and suggesting exercises to improve her technique. He pushed her to experiment with new mediums, to think beyond her familiar pencil sketches. You have a natural ability, Elsie Mae, he'd said, tapping a charcoal drawing. But natural ability is only a tiny part of it. The rest is discipline, practice, and a willingness to fail often. And fail she did. Her attempts at watercolors were muddy disasters. Her first oil painting looked like a child's finger painting. Self-doubt, a familiar companion, crept back in whispering its insidious questions. Who are you to think you can do this? You're a diner waitress, not an artist. Elvis was just being nice. Mr. Davies is just being polite. Her new schedule was grueling. She kept her diner shifts, needing the money, and squeezed in art classes at night, thanks to Mr. Davies suggesting a community college program that offered night classes and even helped her find a small grant she qualified for, making it affordable. Her apartment, once a quiet sanctuary, became a chaotic mess of half-finished paintings, tubes of paint, and smudged charcoals. Her hands were perpetually stained, and the smell of turpentine replaced the faint chemical scent of the dry cleaner. Betty, her roommate, grew more vocal in her skepticism. Honestly, Elsie Mae, you're exhausted all the time, and for what? So you can spend all your money on fancy paints that smell like paint, thinner. You're going to burn yourself out for this art thing. Some days Elsie Mae felt Betty was right. There were mornings when she woke up with an aching body and a mind filled with frustrated images, ready to give up. She'd stare at the phone number Elvis had given her, sometimes even picking it up, just wanting to hear a kind voice, a word of encouragement, but she never called. It was her battle to fight. He had opened the door, she had to walk through it herself. One particularly tough week, after a disastrous critique from her art instructor and a sudden unexpected medical bill that drained her meager savings, Elsie Mae considered quitting everything. She sat in her apartment, surrounded by her failed canvases, tears blurring her vision. This was too hard. She wasn't strong enough then. A small package arrived in the mail. It was a thick, new, spiral-bound sketchbook, much nicer than her old, tattered one inside. Tucked between the first few pages was a note. It wasn't signed, but the elegant, flowing handwriting was unmistakably familiar. "Keep seeing the beauty, Elsie Mae. Keep making it. It's worth the struggle." A friend, Elsie Mae. Gasp! It wasn't a direct contact, no phone call, no grand gesture. Just a quiet, anonymous reminder, perfectly timed. It was enough. It was exactly what she needed. It was proof that someone somewhere still believed in her, still remembered their conversation. Filled her with a renewed sense of purpose, a fierce determination to prove them all wrong. Betty, her doubts, the critical instructor, and most importantly to prove herself right. She plunged back into her work with a new intensity. She studied harder, painted with more passion, allowing herself to experiment, to fail, and to learn from those failures. She spent hours at the gallery, observing how other artists worked, asking Mr. Davies endless questions. She found a quiet corner in a park to sketch strangers, pushing herself to capture their fleeting expressions, their unique stories. She began to notice subtle shifts in her work. Her lines became more confident, her colors, once hesitant, now sang with vibrancy. She discovered a particular joy in capturing the everyday scenes of Memphis, the old jazz clubs, the bustling marketplaces, the quiet dignity of ordinary people. She wasn't just drawing what she saw. She was drawing what she felt about what she saw. The group exhibition arrived, and Elsie Mae's 3 pieces, small but affable, were hung with care. They were simple, yet infused with a raw honesty and a unique perspective. One was a charcoal sketch of the diner's bustling kitchen, capturing the heat and the hurried movements with surprising grace. Another was a vibrant watercolor of the pink Cadillac, rendered from memory its impossible color, a splash of joy on the canvas. The third was a portrait of a street musician, his eyes full of both weariness and a quiet hope. On opening night, Elsie Mae stood nervously in a corner, watching people mill about. She overheard a woman admiring her Cadillac piece. "Who is this Elsie Mae Harper?" the woman mused to her companion. "There's such a lovely sense of wonder in this." Elsie Mae felt a warmth spread through her. It wasn't a sellout crowd or a major art show, but people were looking. There was a small victory, but it was her victory. She still had her diner shifts, and her apartment was still tiny, but her life was no longer defined by the repetitive motions of her old routine. She was an artist. She was learning, growing, and putting herself out there. And she knew with a certainty that settled deep in her bones that it all started with a chance encounter. A pink Cadillac and the kindness of a man who saw potential where she had only seen limitations. The growing pains were real, but so was the growth. The next few months flew by in a blur of turpentine, late-night classes, and early morning diner shifts. Elsie Mae's art continued to evolve, and with it her confidence. Mr. Davies became a true mentor, not just a gallery owner. He taught her about composition, about light, about finding her unique voice. He encouraged her to take risks, to push beyond her comfort zone. Her first sale was a small, unassuming watercolor of a rainy street corner purchased by a quiet couple for a modest sum. Elsie Mae had almost cried when Mr. Davies handed her the check. It wasn't about the money. It was about the validation. Someone had seen her art and wanted it to be part of their home. It meant something. Then came the bigger opportunities. Mr. Davies, impressed by her dedication and rapid improvement, secured her a spot in a more prominent regional art fair. She spent weeks preparing, creating new pieces that explored the hidden beauty of Memphis, the forgotten alleys, the vibrant music scenes, the quiet moments of everyday life that most people walked right past. The fair was overwhelming, a cacophony of voices, colors, and artistic styles. Elsie Mae felt a familiar tremor of self-doubt. Her small booth, with its modest display of charcoal drawings and watercolors, seemed insignificant amidst the grander, more established artists. But she reminded herself of Elvis's words, "You got a gift, Elsie Mae. Don't let it just sit in a sketchbook." She talked to visitors, explaining her process, sharing the stories behind her pieces. She found that people responded to her honesty, to the genuine passion in her voice. She sold a few more pieces, and a local art critic, who visited her booth on a whim, seemed particularly taken by a large charcoal drawing of the Mississippi River. At dusk, its waters reflecting the deep indigo of the sky. It praised her unflinching eye for authentic detail, and her ability to infuse the mundane with poetic grace. Critics singled out her river drawing, calling it a masterpiece of quiet observation. Elsie Mae read the words over and over again, tears blurring her vision. It was real. Someone was recognizing her. The review opened doors. More people came to the Davies Gallery asking for her work. She received invitations to other local exhibitions. And then, the most astonishing news of all, Mr. Davies informed her that a prominent art patron in Nashville, having seen her work at the fairer of her pieces and sponsoring a solo exhibition for her in Nashville later that year. A solo exhibition in Nashville, a city known for its vibrant art scene. Elsie Mae felt like she was dreaming again, but this time it was a dream. She had actively built stroke by painstaking stroke. She gave notice at the diner. It was a bittersweet moment. She thanked her boss, who surprisingly offered a genuine congratulations. "You always had a spark, Elsie Mae. Go on now. Set the world on fire." Leaving the diner, the smell of grease and coffee, a comforting memory rather than an oppressive reality, Elsie Mae felt a profound shift. The girl who had once wiped counters and dreamt of colors in secret was gone. In her place stood a confident artist ready to take on the world. She visited the hilltop again, the secret spot Elvis had shown her. She brought her new, now well-used sketchbook and sat for a long time looking out at the city. It looked different now. Not just a place where she worked, but a place that had nurtured her, a place she now celebrated in her art. She thought about that first day, the awe she'd felt for the pink Cadillac, the shock of seeing Elvis Presley emerge from it. She remembered his kind eyes, his gentle words, his belief in her when she had no belief in herself. That chance encounter, that simple invitation for a ride had been the catalyst. He hadn't given her success. He had given her a push, a belief, a connection, and the courage to take the first terrifying step. He had seen the artist within her long before she could see it herself. Her life had changed fundamentally and irrevocably. She was no longer just surviving. She was thriving. She was pursuing her passion, making a living from it, and finding a deep, abiding joy in the process. The path had been difficult, full of struggles and doubts, but every challenge had strengthened her. Every setback had taught her something new. She felt a wave of overwhelming gratitude for Elvis, a silent thanks to the man who, with a simple act of kindness and a flash of pink chrome, had helped her unlock a future she never knew was possible. He was a distant figure now, a legend, but his impact on her life was as real and vibrant as the colors on her palette. Years passed. Elsie Mae Harper was no longer the struggling artist working diner shifts. Her solo exhibition in Nashville had been a resounding success, leading to more shows, more recognition, and a growing reputation as an artist who captured the soul of the American South with a unique blend of grit and grace. Her work was in demand, adorning the walls of private collectors and even a small museum in her beloved Memphis. She had a studio now, a spacious sunlit room with high ceilings and walls smudged with every color imaginable. She taught art classes to aspiring young artists, sharing the wisdom and encouragement that Mr. Davies had once given her. She lived comfortably, no longer worrying about rent or art supplies. Her life was fulfilling, vibrant, and exactly what she had once only dared to dream of. Elvis Presley, The man who had set her on this path remained a distant, iconic figure. She'd read about his continuing tours, his movies, his life which seemed to grow ever more complex and demanding. Sometimes she'd see a fleeting glimpse of him on TV or hear one of his songs on the radio, and a wave of warmth and gratitude would wash over her. She often wondered if he ever thought of the quiet girl he'd met by his pink Cadillac, the girl whose life he'd unknowingly changed forever. She doubted it. His world was too vast, too busy. Then one crisp autumn evening, fate intervened once more. Elsie Mae had been invited to a charity gala, a prestigious event raising money for a children's hospital in Memphis. She attended reluctantly, preferring the quiet solitude of her studio. But Mr. Davies had insisted it was an important networking opportunity. She was mingling, making polite conversation, when a hush fell over the grand ballroom. All heads turned towards the main entrance. A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. And there he was, Elvis Presley. He looked older, of course. The years of fame, the relentless demands of his career, had etched subtle lines around his eyes. His famous smile was still there, a little more weary perhaps, but still charming. He was impeccably dressed, radiating that unmistakable aura of stardom that filled every room he entered. He was flanked by a couple of security men and a small entourage, but he still held himself with that familiar, easy grace. Elsie Mae felt her heart leap into her throat. He was so close. She hadn't seen him in person since that day by the Cadillac all those years ago. She was no longer the shy, insecure waitress, but a confident, successful artist. Yet in his presence, she felt a flicker of that old nervousness. She debated what to do. Should she approach him? Would he even remember her? It seemed unlikely. She was just one person in a sea of millions who had encountered him over the years, but then a stubborn resolve settled in. She owed him this. She owed him a real, heartfelt thank you. Taking a deep breath, Elsie Mae began to make her way through the throng of people. It took several minutes, weaving between conversations and admiring glances. Finally, she reached the edge of his small circle. He was talking to a senator, his voice a low, friendly rumble. She waited patiently, a small smile on her face. When the senator moved on, there was a brief lull. Elsie Mae stepped forward. "Elvis," she said softly, her voice carrying just enough to reach him. He turned, his blue eyes meeting hers. For a moment there was no recognition, just the polite, practiced gaze of a celebrity used to being approached by strangers. Elsie Mae felt a pang of disappointment. "Yes, ma'am," he asked, his voice kind but guarded. "It's Elsie Mae," she said, a little more clearly. "Elsie Mae Harper. We met a long time ago by your pink Cadillac." His eyes, which had been polite, suddenly widened. A flicker of recognition, then dawning understanding, spread across his face. A genuine smile, one that reached his eyes slowly, broke through. "Elsie Mae," he exclaimed, his voice full of surprise and warmth. Took a step towards her, his bodyguards tensing slightly, but he waved them off. "Well, I'll be. Is that really you?" Elsie Mae laughed, a genuine, joyful sound. "It's really me, Elvis." Took her hand, his grip firm and warm, just as she remembered. He held it for a moment, his thumb rubbing gently over her knuckles. "Good heavens, Elsie Mae, look at you. You're all grown up and looking mighty fine, I might add." He looked her up and down, admiring her elegant dress. "The confident way she held her that diner, are you?" "No," Elsie Mae said, her heart swelling with gratitude. "No, I'm not, thanks to you, Elvis." He frowned, slightly confused. "Thanks to me, how's that?" "The art," she explained, her voice thick with emotion. "The gallery, Mr. Davies. You put in a good word for me. You saw my drawings. You told me I had a gift. You gave me the courage to believe in myself." She looked him straight in the eye, her gratitude pouring out. "You changed my life, Elvis. You truly did." He listened, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding, then to a quiet, profound pleasure. He squeezed her hand gently. "Elsie Mae, I just gave you a name. The rest, that was all you. You had the talent. You had the grit. I just pointed you in a direction." "It was more than that," she insisted, a tear finally escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. "It was everything. I was lost. And you showed me a way." He looked genuinely moved. His eyes, though still tired, held a deep warmth. "Well, I'll be. That's one of the nicest things anyone's ever told me. Elsie Mae, truly." He let go of her hand, but placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "So you're a real artist now? Selling your work? Make a name for yourself?" "Yes," she confirmed, beaming. "I am. And it's because of you." He smiled. A deep, satis voice, softer, more reflective. "Sometimes with all the hullabaloo, you wonder if you're actually doing any good in the world. Makes a man wonder. And then something like this happens. You remind me that maybe, just maybe, I did something right." It wasn't a romantic moment. It was something far deeper. It was a shared acknowledgement of a powerful, unexpected connection. A moment of profound human kindness and the ripple effect it could create. King of rock and roll and the once obscure diner waitress standing together, bound by a pink Cadillac, a shared view of Memphis, and a life truly changed. The conversation with Elvis at the gala was brief, just a few precious minutes amidst the swirling crowd. But it was enough. Enough to confirm that the connection had been real. Enough to share her profound gratitude, and enough to see in his eyes the quiet satisfaction of knowing his simple act of kindness had truly made a difference. After a few more shared words, a quick promise to keep in touch, though Elsie Mae knew how difficult that would be, he was gently pulled away by his entourage. Swallowed once again by the demands of his fame, Elsie Mae stood there, a warm glow spreading through her. She didn't need more from him. She had received the greatest gift of all. The belief in herself ignited by his gentle encouragement, her life continued to flourish. The solo exhibition in Nashville was a triumph leading to even greater opportunities. Her art, which once only captured the quiet corners of Memphis, now branched out, reflecting the changing landscape of the South, the stories of its people, the vibrant energy of its music. She found her own unique voice, distinct and powerful. She never forgot the struggles, the self-doubt, the long nights. And because of those memories, Elsie Mae became an advocate for other aspiring artists, especially those from humble backgrounds, who felt their dreams were out of reach. She established a scholarship fund at the local art college, making sure that financial barriers wouldn't stand in the way of talent. She mentored young students just as Mr. Davies had mentored her, teaching them technique, but also, more importantly, teaching them to believe in their own unique vision. "Don't let anyone tell you your dreams are too small or too silly," she would tell them, her voice firm. "And never, ever underestimate the power of one person's belief in you." She often thought of Elvis. His life, she knew from the papers and whispers, continued to be a whirlwind of success and personal struggles. Sometimes, when she drove her own sensible sedan past the gates of Graceland, she would feel a pang of melancholy, wishing him peace. But her prevailing emotion was always one of deep, unwavering gratitude. Pink Cadillac, that impossible gleaming vehicle, remained a powerful symbol in her mind and in her art. She had painted it many times over the years, each rendition capturing a different facet of its significance. The initial awe, the unexpected journey, the literal and metaphorical open door it represented. One of her most celebrated pieces, titled The Catalyst, was a large, vibrant oil painting of the Cadillac, parked not on a city street, but on a winding, sun-drenched road leading off into a horizon of boundless possibilities. It hung prominently in her studio, a daily reminder of where she had come from and how far she had traveled. That chance encounter on a hot Memphis afternoon, a simple moment of connection between a global icon and a quiet diner waitress, had been the turning point. It wasn't a grand, pre-planned event, but a spontaneous act of kindness from a man who saw past the uniform and recognized a spark of talent and a hungry spirit. He didn't give her fame or fortune. He gave her validation, opportunity, and the invaluable gift of seeing her own potential. Elsie Mae Harper. The artist lived a life rich with purpose, creativity, and impact. She had found her voice, not just in her art, but in her life. She taught others to find theirs. And it all started with a car, a color, a question, and a man who asked it, changing her life and in turn touching the lives of countless others in a ripple effect of kindness that began with a single heartwarming glimpse of a magnificent pink Cadillac. King had given her a kingdom, not of fame, but of purpose and self-discovery, and she cherished it with every brushstroke.